Okay, haven't uploaded in a few days, so this is a little catch-up video. First of all, Gennady Golovkin, he retained his IBF world middleweight title against Kamil. Szeremeta stopped him in 7 rounds. I thought Golovkin looked pretty good. He looked his normal self to me. I was watching to see if there was any noticeable deterioration because his previous fight against Derevyanchenko, he got hurt to the body. He had a very rough night, and many people believe he was fortunate to get the decision. But here against Szeremeta, he was able to do what he wanted. Now, perhaps that's because Szeremeta wasn't good enough to make Golovkin look his age. Or maybe, as Golovkin said, there were issues going into the Derevyanchenko fight. Now, he's been working with Jonathan Banks now for a couple fights. And I don't know if this Szeremeta fight is anything to go by in terms of whether there's changes in him because he's working with Jonathan Banks, or whether it's just because he had an opponent in front of him who he was very comfortable against and didn't really feel much of a threat. But I did notice that Golovkin was throwing every punch in the book in this fight. He was throwing jabs, hooks, uppercuts, overarm shots, literally every shot in the book. Now, he's always had those punches in his arsenal, but in a lot of fights, he's more conservative. He doesn't show his entire punch variety as often in most fights as he did here against Szeremeta, because as I say, he was throwing every punch in the book against this guy. And obviously Szeremeta went down several times. He kept getting up, brave guy, but eventually it was too much and the fight was over in 7. So I thought it was normal Golovkin to me, apart from the fact he was, throwing a bit more variety more often than usual. Golovkin is a very heavy-handed fighter, but he's not very fast. And that's obviously not going to change at the age of 38. And, I personally, just from an entertainment perspective, I prefer fighters who are explosive, who are fast, like Mike Tyson in his prime. He was a big puncher, but he was fast with it. He was explosive with it. Sugar Ray Leonard, he was fast and explosive. Roy Jones Jr., those kind of guys. Even Canelo Alvarez, Gennady Golovkin's rival. Alvarez has got more sudden movements. The way he throws his shots, it's very sudden, it's very explosive and fast. Personally, I prefer watching that from an entertainment perspective, rather than a guy who is slower, more deliberate and methodical, but has these very, very heavy hands. It's just, to me, more exciting watching an explosive guy. But either way, that doesn't take away from Golovkin's ability. That doesn't take away from his achievements and what have you. That's just my personal preference from an entertainment perspective. Golovkin is more, I can't really say Foreman, because Foreman didn't have the kind of form, the technique that Golovkin has. Foreman was more wild and ragged, but in the sense that Foreman was heavy-handed, he wasn't fast. So anyway, that's just an aside. Golovkin's next move, well, we know that they're talking about a third fight with Canelo Alvarez. They're also talking about a fight against Jaime Munguia. Now, personally, that's a fight I actually like. That was a fight that they tried to make a couple years ago, when the rematch with Canelo Alvarez was postponed because of that tainted beef situation. I think it was because of the tainted beef situation. They were talking about putting Golovkin in with Jaime Munguia. He didn't fight Jaime Munguia in the end. He fought somebody else. But they were talking about it. And at the time, I'd never heard of Munguia. And I went and looked him up and I thought, wow, this is just a young kid. You can't put this guy in with Golovkin. But since then, I've watched a lot of Munguia, and there's kind of mixed views on him. Some people think that, yeah, Munguia is the truth. Munguia is good. Other people say, Munguia is a bit of a hype job. I am not sure exactly how good Munguia is, but I like him from an entertainment perspective. I think he's very energetic. I think he is, enthusiastic, young. He's strong. He's improving. So I like watching Jaime Munguia fights. They're usually entertaining and exciting. He did have that fight against, Hogan that many people thought was dubious in terms of the decision. But it's a learning process. When you got a young fighter like that, he's going to have, very often, they're going to have these close calls and these controversial fights. Riddick Bowe, heavyweight back in the 90s, when he was on the way up, he had a real close fight with Tony Tubbs. Tony Tubbs was coming to the end of his career. Riddick Bowe's an up-and-coming guy, and he's struggling with the likes of Tony Tubbs. Tubbs was taken out in 2 rounds by Mike Tyson years before that. Riddick Bowe's there, young prospect coming up, the next would-be heavyweight champion, and he's struggling with Tony Tubbs. Gets a questionable decision. So, in fact, did he get a decision or was that a draw? No, I'm sure he got a decision. Anyway, a long time ago, since I saw the Tubbs fight. And he also had issues with Tyrell Biggs. He did stop Tyrell Biggs, but he was hurt in that fight, Riddick Bowe. So, Muhammad Ali, Henry Cooper, and a couple other guys he had issues with on the way up before he fought Sonny Liston and won the world heavyweight title. Now, I'm not saying that Jaime Munguia is going to be as good as those guys, but I'm just pointing out that you can't write somebody off just because they have a few issues on the way up. I think that Munguia's youth and his energy, his work rate, might be able to give Golovkin problems. Again, that's why I was looking at the Szeremeta fight and seeing if there was any signs of deterioration there. Because Golovkin can be overwhelmed in fights. The first time I saw it was against Willie Monroe, where Willie Monroe opened up on Golovkin and Golovkin wasn't punching back because he's not a guy with fast hands. All right, so when he punches with you, he might be able to throw 2 and 3 shots, but if he's in there against a much quicker guy, that guy's getting off 5, 6 shots for every 2, 3 Golovkin gets off. Now, sometimes Golovkin is willing to do that, to take the shots just to land his own. But other times, he'll just cover up. And he'll have this passive defense where he's not punching with you because there are too many punches coming. Now, with Jaime Munguia, he's a big guy and a big target. Right? He's tall. I think taller than Golovkin. Might be, 6 foot? 6'1"? So he's tall. He's got a long body. There's plenty of target there for Golovkin to aim at. But he does have tremendous energy levels. There's no way that Golovkin is going to be able to match Jaime Munguia's energy levels. No way. A guy who's in his early 20s like that, the energy, the testosterone is just naturally higher than a guy who's in his late 30s. So he's not going to be able to match him for energy. He's going to have to strategically break him down, hit him to the body, bring some of that energy down, put some damage on him to take that energy away. And here's me talking as if the fight is going to happen, but they are behind the scenes apparently considering it. So it's a fight I like. Golovkin would surely be the favorite going in. But when you've got a guy early 20s against a guy late 30s, very often the guy in the early 20s, even if he's the underdog, can pull it off. I mean, think again, Muhammad Ali versus Sonny Liston. Sonny Liston was in his 30s, and some people say he was older than his official age. Ali was in his early 20s. You saw what happened there. Obviously, styles make fights, and Sonny Liston was a tremendous fighter. And again, I'm not saying that Munguia is as good as Sonny Liston, but it's the same kind of principle. Sometimes an older guy who has the technique, who has the experience, he can just get overwhelmed by the athleticism and the energy and the youth of a younger guy. Even if that younger guy isn't as good as him technically, even if that younger guy couldn't have lived with him 10 years prior, you get to a point where the energy and the work rate, the enthusiasm of the younger guy is just too much. So it's a fight I'm interested in. That's the bottom line. Whoever wins it, I want to see it. In fact, I would prefer Golovkin fight Munguia first before he fights Canelo again, because that to me would make the Canelo fight, the trilogy fight, more appealing. Now he's fighting another Mexican, a young up-and-coming guy. If he can get past him, then it kind of sets the Canelo fight up, because Canelo will come back, okay, I'm going to show Mexico how it's done, right? Here's this guy just beat up a young up and coming Mexican fighter, but I'm still the king of Mexico. So I'm going to take Golovkin to school once more. That's going to be the narrative behind a Canelo Golovkin trilogy fight if Golovkin was able to beat Munguia. And if Golovkin wasn't able to beat Munguia, then a new star is born. If Munguia actually wins that fight, then surely you're going to see Munguia against Charlo, maybe Munguia against Canelo, I know he is with Golden Boy, isn't he, Munguia? Or am I tripping? Yeah, I'm sure he's with Golden Boy. And obviously Canelo used to be with Golden Boy. So you could see, Canelo Alvarez and Oscar De La Hoya sitting at the same press conference table again, but this time not as a fighter and promoter, this time as rivals. Maybe you'll have Eddie Hearn on Canelo's side and then Oscar De La Hoya and Munguia on the other side. So it'll be it'll be interesting. So yeah, that's one route for Gennady Golovkin to fight Munguia. They look at the Canelo fight. I mean, he could just go straight for Jamal Charlo. Does he really need that fight? Does he want that fight? Is it possible to do, given the fact that Charlo's with PBC and PBC are on that BS, cross the street and all this nonsense that we don't want to hear? We just want to get the fights made. We don't want to hear about no cross the street nonsense. Where there's a will, there's a way. And if two fighters and two promotional outfits want a particular fight, it will happen. When one side doesn't want it, that's when, you got to cross the street comes out. So we don't want to hear that. Anyway, let me know what you guys think in the comments below about Gennady Golovkin and his performance against Szeremeta, his next move, who you'd like to see him fight next, and how long you think he has left in the game at 38 years of age. He's no spring chicken, and he's not a heavyweight. Generally speaking, guys in the lighter weight divisions don't tend to age as well as heavyweights do. So, and I think part of the reason for that may be the weight making, but another part of the reason I think is because reflexes matter even more in the lighter weights than they do at the heavier weights, because obviously the smaller guys are faster. Their brains are having to move quicker. They tend to throw more punches. So once your reflexes start to dip, you're getting punished way more because the guys are faster and they're throwing more shots. Whereas with the big, slow heavyweights, who, yeah, some heavyweights are fast, but compared to the lighter guys, they're generally much slower, throw far fewer punches. It's a bit more forgiving. If your reflexes are dimming a little bit, it's a bit more forgiving in the heavyweight division than it is, let's say, in the welterweight division. Now, when I say forgiving, obviously at heavyweight, the punches are so powerful that you could get taken out. You see a lot more knockdowns and dramatic knockouts at a high level in heavyweight boxing when compared to, let's say, welterweight. But it works both ways. I mean, we just saw that with Povetkin, 40 or 41, when he knocked out Dylan White, a man like 10 years younger than him. So it works both ways. Anyway, Szeremeta performance I thought was decent from Golovkin, did what he had to do, showed good punch variety, knocked the guy down several times, even with a double jab, which is always good to see. Golovkin got that ramrod jab. And yeah, just let me know what you think his next move should be. If you'd like to access all my boxing content advert-free and enjoy the convenience of listening via a podcast app with the option to download in high-quality MP3, then consider joining me on Patreon. In addition to the aforementioned perks, you'll also gain access to exclusive weekly live stream Q&A sessions and hangouts, as well as uncensored, no-holds-barred uploads, which are too blue for YouTube. This includes my popular Confessions of a Nightclub Bouncer series. Just head on over to my Patreon page and select the tier called Hatman Boxing Extra. There's no contract, there's no commitment, it's only £2.50 a month, and you can cancel at any time. So come and join our community of hardcore boxing enthusiasts by signing up with me here on Patreon today.